A wealthy billionaire installs a top security safe in his mansion, confident that he's the only one who can open it. But when he forgets the code, the entire household falls into tension. While every expert fails a 10-year-old boy, the housekeeper's son steps forward and opens the safe, using only what he saw once. Instead of thanking him, the billionaire explodes in anger and attacks the child in front of everyone. No one expected that moment to expose a truth that would change everything. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The safe arrived on a clear morning, the kind of morning when the sky looked wiped clean and the sunlight bounced off every shiny surface of the Johnson estate. 2 trucks rolled up the long driveway, tires crunching on the gravel. A pair of delivery men in blue coveralls stepped down, stretching their backs before opening the rear doors. Inside the truck sat something that did not look like it belonged to ordinary people, a tall steel gray box with thick hinges and a heavy door that seemed to swallow the light. They wheeled it up the stone steps on a metal dolly, muscles straining, boots scraping. The front doors of the mansion opened before they even rang the bell. Tom Johnson stood there, already dressed for the day. He wore a dark suit that fit him like it had been sewn on while he slept, his gray hair cut close, his jaw clean-shaven. He barely looked at the delivery men's faces. His eyes went straight to the safe, and his mouth twitched into something close to a smile. "Careful with that," he said, even though they were being careful. His voice was low and firm, the kind of voice that expected people to move faster. "Yes, sir." One of the men puffed, pushing the dolly across the polished floor. The mansion swallowed them in silence. Light poured through tall windows and fell across marble floors, glass railings, and expensive artwork that hung in the halls. A faint citrus scent from some hidden air freshener followed them as they rolled the safe down the hallway toward Tom's office. Inside the office looked more like the control room of a small empire than a simple workspace. A wide glass desk sat near the windows with a view of the manicured lawns and trimmed hedges outside. 2 computer monitors glowed softly on the desk, even at this hour. On one wall stood built-in shelves lined with books and awards. On another wall, a space had been cleared, fresh drywall reinforced and painted a calm white, waiting for the safe. The men eased the safe into position with slow, careful movements, grunting under the weight. "Right there," Tom said, "flush with the wall. I don't want any gaps." "Yes, sir." They adjusted, pushing and pulling, the sounds of metal and effort echoing in the room. One of the men wiped a sleeve across his forehead, leaving a faint streak of dust. Tom stood with his hands behind his back, watching like a man inspecting a sculpture he had ordered. His eyes were sharp, but there was something else there too, an odd, hungry satisfaction. "Look at that," he murmured. "Beautiful." The lead installer turned to him, catching his breath. "You chose a serious unit, Mr. Johnson. Waldus Ultra Resistance Class 7, top of the line." "I know exactly what it is," Tom replied. "Let's go over the terms again." They stepped aside to the desk. The installer pulled a thin folder from his bag and spread out several pages of paperwork. The edges of the paper were neat and square, not a crease in sight. "As you requested," the man said, tapping one of the pages, "there is no backup code, no master key, no factory override. The combination exists only in your control. So, if I forget it," Tom asked. "If you forget it," the man said carefully, "that's the end of it. We cannot open it without destroying the contents. And even that would be questionable. It would likely be impossible." Tom's mouth curved in a hard line. He reached for the pen without hesitation. "That is what I want," he said. "If I misplace my own mind, that's my problem, but no one else. No one gets in there." He signed his name in a quick practice stroke. Tom Johnson. The letters flowed fast and confident, like he had been signing away other people's wishes his entire life. The installer watched him, then added his own signature, then another form. "We just like to make sure you understand the risk, sir. Once this is done, we can't help you later." "Good," Tom said, handing the pen back. "I don't pay people to keep doors open. I pay them to close them." He turned and looked at the safe again. In the quiet of the office, the thing seemed to hum with importance. Inside it would go bonds, cash, passwords, account numbers, documents that could lift or bury a company. $200 million in value stored in one box that would never be opened by anyone who did not know the right numbers. Behind his calm face, a thought passed like a shadow. "No board will ever hold this over me. No government, no partner. No one can reach in here but me." He felt taller just standing in front of it. Outside the office, the hallway stretched long and clean. The sound of voices inside was muffled by the thick door, unheard by the woman who walked past a few minutes later carrying a small basket of folded towels. Rose Stevenson moved with quiet steps, her soft-soled shoes barely making a sound on the polished floor. Her uniform was simple dark slacks, a pale blouse, her hair pulled back. In her mid-30s, her face still held traces of the girl she used to be, but long days and worry had softened the edges of her smile and left faint lines near her eyes. Beside her, half a step behind, walked her 10-year-old son, Peter. He wore a plain t-shirt and jeans, his sneakers clean but worn at the edges. His eyes were what most people noticed first, big, dark, and sharp, always moving, always taking in everything. At that moment, they were on the towels his mother carried, counting the folds, tracing the tiny frayed thread on one corner. They had started their day in the small staff kitchen on the first floor long before the safe arrived. The kitchen was narrow, with beige walls and a humming refrigerator that had a slight rattle every time the motor kicked on. The air smelled of coffee toast and cleaning chemicals, the familiar morning scent of work. Rose stood at the counter, leaning slightly as she spread peanut butter on 2 slices of bread. The jar made a soft scraping sound as she dug the knife in. Beside her, on the little table pushed against the wall, sat Peter's lunchbox lid, open and waiting. "You want an apple or banana today?" she asked, glancing back at him. He was sitting on a chair, heels not quite reaching the floor, swinging his legs gently. He shrugged one shoulder. "Apple," he said. "The green one. They crunch better." She smiled a little at that and reached into a plastic bag, picking out a Granny Smith. As she washed it under the tap, she checked the clock above the microwave. Almost time. "Okay," she said, drying the apple with a paper towel. "We've got 10 minutes before we start. Eat your toast now, not later. You know how it gets if it sits." He nodded obediently and reached for the first piece she handed him. The toast was too big for his hand. He had to grip it with both. His fingers were long and slim like hers. Rose wiped the counter, moving with speed and habit. Every motion had a purpose. The morning rush never really went away, even when the house was quiet. She set the last things in place, then turned to him. "All right," she said, softening her voice. "Let's go over the rules again." He looked up at her, his dark eyes calm but attentive. He knew the rules. She still needed to say them. "What do we do when we go upstairs?" she asked. "Stay quiet," he replied. "Stay out of the way. Stay where you tell me to stay." And she pressed gently. "And don't talk to Mr. Johnson unless he talks to me first," he said. "And even then, be respectful no matter what he says." Her throat tightened a little on that last part. She hated that she had to teach her son how to absorb disrespect like it was part of his job. "Good," she said, reaching up to smooth his shirt. There was a tiny wrinkle near the collar that no one else would have noticed, but she straightened it anyway. "You remember what I say about you being here?" He recited it like a line he had learned for a school play. "I'm not staff. I'm not a guest. I'm a shadow." Her heart pinched. "A quiet shadow," she corrected softly. "Just until school opens back up. Then you can go back to being a kid full-time." He nodded, his eyes searching her face. "I know." She cupped his cheek for a moment, her hand warm against his cool skin. "I'm sorry you have to come with me like this." He chewed and shrugged. "It's okay, Mama. I like watching things. It's like a movie. Just without sound." She let out a low breath that might have been a laugh. She picked up the lunchbox, handed it to him, and took the basket of towels. "Come on," she said. "Let's go be invisible." The mansion always felt colder than their apartment, even when the air conditioner wasn't turned up high. It was not a harsh cold, more like the chill in a museum where everything was polished and distant, and nothing belonged to you. As they moved through the hallways, the soft squeak of her shoes and faint rustle of fabric were the only sounds they made. Sunlight poured through big windows, landing in perfect rectangles on the floors. The house smelled clean and faintly floral, a contrast to the bleach and mop water of the staff areas. They were passing the wide doorway to the main hallway outside the office when Tom appeared for the first time that day. He came out of his office quickly, walking with purpose. His steps were sure, his shoulders straight. He held a tablet in one hand and a phone in the other, his eyes already on the screen. He almost walked past them without seeing. Almost. His gaze lifted and snagged on them. For a moment, his expression did not change at all. Then his eyes narrowed. Rose stopped so fast her shoes made a soft scuff on the marble. Her heart gave a jump. She shifted her body slightly in front of Peter, not enough to be obvious, but enough that he was partly shielded by her shoulder. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," she said quietly. He gave her a brief nod. Rose. His eyes moved to Peter. They paused, traveling from his face to the lunchbox in his hand, then down to his shoes. There was no curiosity in his gaze, only annoyance, as if he were looking at a piece of furniture someone had left in the wrong hallway. "I thought," Tom said slowly, "that we discussed the matter of children in work areas." His tone was not loud, but it had weight. "Yes, sir." Rose replied, keeping her eyes near his shoulder rather than his face. "The school is still closed. I didn't have anyone else to watch him. He stays out of the way. He doesn't touch anything." Tom's lips pressed together. He shifted his attention back to Peter as if she had not spoken. "Children," he said, "are distractions. They are not employees." Peter stood very still. He felt his own heart beating against the inside of his chest. His fingers tightened on the lunchbox handle until the plastic edge dug into his palm. "Yes, sir," Rose said again. "I understand." Tom made a small, impatient gesture with his phone like he was brushing dust off the air. "See that you do," he said. His gaze lingered on Peter for another breath. "Boys like him don't belong in these halls. This is not a playground." Something hot flared in Rose's chest, but she kept her face calm. "He knows that, sir." Tom snorted softly and moved past them, the scent of his cologne trailing behind him. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hallway. He turned a corner and was gone. Rose let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her shoulders sagged for half a second before she straightened them again. "You okay, baby?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," Peter said. It was true and not true. His body was fine. His feelings were not. He stared at the spot where Tom had been. There was something about the man's voice that seemed to put a line down the middle of the room, one side for people like him, the other side for people like them. Whatever side Tom stood on, he made sure everyone else knew they were on the other. People like him, Peter thought. He means people like us. Like me. Like Mama. He did not say that out loud. Instead, he took a small step closer to his mother. She reached out and adjusted his collar again, though it did not need it. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's keep moving. The faster we work, the sooner we go home." They walked on. Later, as the day moved toward afternoon, the staff entrance buzzed with a quieter kind of life. There were fewer polished surfaces here, more concrete and practical things. The air smelled of trash bag soap and the faint sweetness of someone's perfume that had drifted down from upstairs. Out near the loading area where the back door opened to a narrow patch of pavement, Elijah Vance was lifting a heavy trash bag onto a cart. The cart's wheels squeaked every time he moved it, a familiar complaint that no one bothered to fix. Elijah stood about 40, his Navy janitor uniform clean, but faded at the edges. His hair was cut close, his beard trimmed neat. There was a steadiness in the way he moved, like a man who had learned not to rush unless there was real danger. He set down the bag and rolled his shoulders. The mid-afternoon sun bounced off a shallow puddle near the drain, sending little flashes of light across the concrete. He noticed movement at the side door and saw Peter slipping out carrying an empty bucket. The boy sat down on the low concrete step outside and placed the bucket next to him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and watched a spider making its way across the rough ground. "Hey there, little man," Elijah called, his voice easy. "World treating you all right today?" Peter looked up surprised, then gave a small smile. "Hi, Mr. Elijah." Elijah wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his belt and picked up a bottle of water from the cart. He walked over and held it out. "You look like you could use this," he said. "Thank you," Peter said, taking it with both hands. The bottle felt cool and wet against his fingers. He noticed a tiny scratch on the label and the way the plastic had a little dent near the cap. Elijah sat down on the step with a small groan, his knees cracking softly. "Your mama inside?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Peter said. "She's cleaning the guest rooms. She told me to sit out here for a minute and not touch anything." "Sounds like something she'd say," Elijah replied, chuckling. "She works hard, your mama." "I know," Peter said quietly. He twisted the cap off the bottle and took a sip. The water tasted like nothing in particular, but it felt good, sliding down his dry throat. Elijah watched him for a moment, noticing the way the boy's eyes flicked from the puddle to the doorway to the cart with the trash bags, taking everything in. "You see everything, don't you?" Elijah said. Peter frowned a little. "What do you mean, I've been around a while?" Elijah said. "I know when somebody's not just staring off into space. You've got eyes like a camera, always recording." Peter lowered the bottle and looked at him more directly. "I remember things he said, numbers and stuff, and what people say. Sometimes I don't want to, but it just sticks." "Yeah," Elijah said, interest brightening his eyes. Like what Peter thought for a second. He pointed back toward the door. "The bulletin board next to the staff room," he said. "The schedule has Miss Lena on Monday and Friday for laundry, mister. Pete on Tuesday and Thursday for lawn maintenance, and you on every day for trash." He paused. "The break room fridge cleaning is the first Wednesday of every month at 3, but nobody does it." Elijah blinked, then laughed, his deep chuckle rolling out into the warm air. "You got me on that last part," he said. "We all pretend we don't see that note." Peter smiled, shy but pleased. "Does it ever turn off?" Elijah asked. "That memory of yours?" Peter shook his head. "No. It's like every day is written on a page in a book, and I can flip back and see it. I remember what people wore, what they said, what they were holding, even if it didn't seem important." He hesitated, then added, "Sometimes it makes my head feel full." Elijah studied him, seeing not just a quiet kid, but something sharper behind his eyes. He had known a lot of children in his life, nieces, nephews, kids in his old neighborhood, and this one was different. "That's a gift," Elijah said gently. "Don't let anybody tell you different." Peter looked down at his sneakers. "Mr. Johnson doesn't like me watching things," he said. "He doesn't like me being here." Elijah's jaw tightened for just a moment. He looked out at the fence line, at the way the afternoon light slid along it, and chose his words with care. "Some folks," he said, "slowly get nervous when other people see too much, especially when they're used to being the only ones looking down from the top." Peter listened, rolling the bottle cap between his fingers. "But that doesn't change what your mind can do," Elijah went on. "You remember numbers, words, little details. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something you can use." For what Peter asked. Those words stayed with Peter even after Elijah stood up and went back to his cart. "To help people," Elijah had said. "To help yourself and the people you care about. Maybe one day to help folks who can't help themselves." The afternoon light had shifted slowly across the concrete as Peter rolled that thought around in his head. A gift was something you used, not something you buried. He just did not know yet what that would mean for him. He would find out sooner than he ever imagined. The next morning started like any other, with sunlight pouring in through the tall windows of the mansion and the quiet shuffle of staff moving through their routines. In Tom Johnson's office, however, the day did not begin slowly. Tom stood in front of the new safe, his feet planted a little too far apart, his hands flexing at his sides. The office was bright and still. The only sounds were the soft whir of the computer on his desk and the distant murmur of a leaf blower outside. He stared at the dial. It stared back. He licked his lips and reached for it, his fingers closing around the cool metal. The dial felt solid, expensive, precise. He turned it with the easy confidence of a man who considered himself sharp, capable, in control. Left 3 times. He could see himself the night before coming in from the charity gala, tie loosened, jacket off, whiskey warming his blood. He had felt almost giddy with his own cleverness then. He had spun the dial and talked to the safe like it was an old friend. Left 3 times to... He frowned. 40. Something. He turned the dial anyway, letting it circle once, twice, 3 times. The numbers rolled past 20, 30, 40, 50. The little tick mark lined up with 42. No, that's not right. He tried again. The feeling of certainty he expected did not come. His mind felt like a room with a light just about to flicker on, but it stayed dim. Left 3 times to 47, he muttered, almost grasping it. Was it 47? He turned the dial to 47 and paused. His jaw tightened. Right 2 times. His fingers moved the metal smooth under his skin. The dial clicked softly as it passed each number. He watched it line up with 23. 23, he breathed. That sounds right. Left once more. He tried to summon the numbers from the fog. 90. Something. He could almost hear his own voice from last night, but the words slid away. Come on. He muttered, anger coloring his tone now. This is ridiculous. He picked 91 because it felt right on his tongue, because he liked numbers that looked strong. Then right to 15. He remembered that one clearly. He thought he did. He set the last number, took a breath, and pulled the handle. Nothing happened. The safe did not move. No heavy click. No soft release. Just silence. He tried again. Same numbers. Same careful pace. Same stubborn silence. He stepped back, feeling a strange hollow sensation in his chest, as if the floor had lowered by half an inch. It's just the hangover, he told himself. You had more to drink than usual. Your brain will catch up. Sit down. Eat breakfast. Come back. He walked over to his desk and picked up the small silver bell he used to call for staff. He rang it once, a bright, clear sound that cut through the quiet. Moments later, a young man in a crisp shirt stepped in with a tray. Eggs, toast, coffee, a glass of orange juice, the simple breakfast of a very rich man. On the table, Tom said, barely glancing at him, "Yes, sir." The tray was set down. The staff member slipped back out the door, closing softly behind him. The smell of coffee drifted up, but Tom barely noticed. He paced between the desk and the safe, his mind turning faster than the dial had. 47, 23, 91, 15. He tried again. Same path, same failure. He felt the first real prickle of fear then. It settled low in his stomach, tight and cold. "Don't be dramatic," he scolded himself. "You're not some old man misplacing his car keys. You're fine. It'll come back." But it did not. Underscore 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 underscore. By late morning, the office looked different. The breakfast tray sat half-eaten on the side table. Toast crumbs dotted the plate. The coffee had gone cold, a thin skin forming on top. On the desk lay several sheets of paper covered in numbers, birthdays, anniversaries, deal dates, random combinations. Most were scratched out, circled, scrawled over. Tom had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His tie was loosened. His hair, usually so precise, showed a small wave out of place near his temple, where he had run his hand through it too many times. He had called the manufacturer. He had listened jaw clenched as a calm voice on the other end reminded him of the forms he had signed. "You requested no backup code, Mr. Johnson," the representative had said. "No override, no stored combination, no physical master. I know what I requested," Tom had snapped. "I am asking what you can do now." "Without the code, there is nothing we can legally do to open that safe," the voice replied. "The design is meant to prevent tampering even from us. You're telling me I paid for a box I can't open. You paid for security that cannot be bypassed," the representative said, clearly repeating a familiar line. "We fulfilled that request." Now, in the quiet after the call, Tom stood in front of the safe again. He stared at it, seeing not just metal and numbers, but the sum of what lay inside bearer bonds, cash account details for overseas holdings, confidential documents tied to the upcoming Henderson merger. The merger was worth $400 million. The papers inside the safe were not just paper. They were leverage. They were control. Without them, he was weaker. That was the one thing he could not stand to feel. On the outside, he was still a tall man in a fine office. On the inside, something had started to shake loose. "I did this," he thought, angered by the truth. "I insisted. No backup, no help. A fortress only I could enter." Now the fortress had become a cell, and he was locked outside looking in. Underscore 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 underscore. By the afternoon, the staff corridors were buzzing in the quiet way of people who did not want to be heard gossiping, but could not stop themselves from talking. In the narrow hallway, near the laundry room, two housekeepers whispered as they folded sheets. In the break room, the television played a news channel on low volume, while a couple of staff members poured coffee and traded glances. "They say he's been in that office all morning," one woman murmured, stirring sugar into her cup. "Yelling at someone on the phone about a safe." "A safe," another asked, eyebrows lifting. "What safe?" "Big one," she said, forming a square in the air with her hands. "The new one they brought in yesterday. Fancy." You can tell just by the way he looked at it. Across the room, Rose rinsed a mug in the sink, listening without turning her head. The warm water ran over her fingers, turning them pink. She watched a little bubble of soap swirl toward the drain and disappear. "The documents for that big deal of his are in there," the first woman went on. "The Henderson thing. My cousin's boyfriend works in one of his offices, says everybody's talking about it. $400 million, someone else said, whistling low. Imagine misplacing that." They laughed. Rose dried the mug and set it on the rack. Her eyes met Elijah's across the room. He was leaning against the doorframe with a can of soda in his hand, listening. He gave her a small nod, and "I hear it too," without words. She nodded back. Her mind was already racing ahead of the gossip. If Tom could not get to those papers, could the merger fall through? If the merger fell through, what happened to the company? If the company stumbled, what happened to the staff? Her job was not a cushy one, but it was a job. It paid the rent on their small apartment. It covered just enough groceries, just enough bus fares, just enough of her mother's medication. If this place started cutting costs, they would not start by trimming the top. Peter sat at a small table near the corner, a juice box in front of him, his homework open. The math problems on the page, fractions, and simple word problems blurred at the edges as he focused on the drifting bits of conversation instead. Safe. Documents. Big deal. Locked. Can't open. He pictured the safe in his mind as clearly as if he were standing in front of it. He remembered the night before the way the dial had turned under Tom's hands, the way Tom's voice had wrapped around the numbers like a song he did not deserve to sing. Left 3 to 47, right 2 to 23, left to 91, right to 15. He could see those numbers in his mind like bright chalk on a dark board. He took a small sip from the juice box. The cardboard was soft near the top where his fingers had pressed. His stomach felt strangely tight, like he had eaten too fast. "Baby, you okay?" Rose asked, catching the look on his face as she passed. "Yeah," he said, though he did not sound sure even to himself. He looked up at her, and for a second she saw the numbers in his eyes, but of course she did not know what they were. Underscore 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 underscore. Over the next few days, the house took on a tense, strained feel, like a family trying not to talk about a fight everyone had heard. Strange vans began to arrive at the back entrance. Men and women in work boots and tool belts carried in equipment cases. Some wore coveralls, others wore company polos with logos for security firms and safe specialists. Peter noticed every face. He saw the way each team walked in full of confidence and walked out a few hours later with tight mouths and tired eyes. He saw the way Tom's expression went from hopeful to angry to downright ugly, all in the space of a morning. The first team came on a Tuesday. He watched them wheel a small machine down the hallway, its screen glowing. They went into the office, shut the door, and stayed there a long time. Rose was dusting a table outside, moving slower than usual so she could stay nearby. Peter wiped the baseboard's cloth in hand, but his ears were turned toward the muffled sounds from inside, the faint tapping of tools, low voices, the occasional sharp word from Tom. After a while, the door opened. The lead technician, a man in his 50s with a soft gray mustache, came out shaking his head. "We've never seen anything like it," he muttered to his team. He wanted impossible. He got it. Tom followed them out, his face flushed. "So that's it," he said. "That's all you've got. We cannot do what you asked without destroying the contents, sir," the man said, keeping his voice level. "We've explained this." Tom swore under his breath and stalked back into his office. The next day, another group came, younger, sharper, carrying laptops and devices with wires. They were just as confident going in and just as discouraged coming out. On the third day, a woman arrived with a small, neat team behind her. She wore dark slacks and a fitted shirt under a light jacket, her hair pulled back. She introduced herself as Sasha Gates. Her handshake was firm. Her eyes were clear. Peter watched from down the hall, pretending to concentrate on the framed artwork he was dusting. Sasha stepped into the office with calm steps, taking in the space, the safe, and Tommy in one sweep. There was no fear in her only focus. He liked her immediately, though he did not know why. She and her team ran tests, checked the hinges, measured, consulted a manual thicker than some school books. From time to time, the office door opened and closed as they carried tools in and out. One of those times, as she stepped into the hallway, she noticed Peter watching. Their eyes met. For half a second, he considered looking away, shrinking back into the wallpaper like he had trained himself to do. Instead, he held her gaze. Just for a moment. She gave him a small professional nod before turning back to her work. Inside, Tom pressed them harder than he had the others. "There has to be something," he said. "You people call yourselves experts, but you're telling me a machine beat you." Sasha spoke plainly. "There's a difference between security and show, Mr. Johnson. You paid for real security. We can't break it open without destroying what's inside." "That's not acceptable," he snapped. "It's reality," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel in it. Outside, Rose exchanged a glance with Elijah. He was mopping the floor nearby, moving the mop back and forth in an even rhythm. His eyes were not on the floor. They were on Tom's door. "This isn't going to end well," Elijah murmured under his breath. "For who?" Rose asked quietly. "For whoever is closest when he finally loses grip," Elijah said. "You make sure that's not you and your boy. You hear?" She pressed her lips together and nodded. Underscore, 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 underscore. That night, the mansion was far away, just a shadow in their day. At their small apartment, the world shrank down to a kitchen table, a stack of bills, and a single lamp with a shade that leaned slightly to one side. The apartment was on the third floor of an older building. The radiator clicked sometimes when it turned on. The carpet was worn in a path from the front door to the kitchen. They did not have much, but the place was clean. Rose made sure of that. She sat at the table with a stack of envelopes in front of her. Some were already open, their contents spread out like pieces of a puzzle she could not quite solve. Rent, utilities, a medical bill for her mother's last doctor visit, a notice from the school district about delayed reopening. The numbers on the pages looked nothing like the numbers in her son's head. These numbers did not line up neatly. They leaned against each other, shaky and unfair. Peter sat across from her, his notebook, open pencil in hand. He was supposed to be finishing his homework, but he kept looking at her face. She had taken off her work blouse and was now in a faded t-shirt. There was a tired slump to her shoulders she tried to hide when she glanced up at him. "How's it going?" she asked, nodding toward his notebook. "It's fine," he said. "Fractions." He read one problem out loud just to fill the air. "If you cut a pizza into 8 slices and eat 3, what fraction is left?" He shrugged. 5/8. "You always were good at that stuff," she said, forcing a smile. He watched her thumb rub at a spot on one of the envelopes back and forth, like she could rub the ink off. "Mama," he said softly. If Mr. Johnson can't open his safe," he said slowly, "and he needs those papers." "What happens?" She let out a breath. She had hoped he hadn't been listening that closely at work. Of course he had. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe he finds another way. Maybe he loses the deal. And if he loses the deal," she looked at the bills. She looked at him. "If that happens," she said carefully, "he's going to look for someone to blame. And he's not going to blame himself." He thought about that. "Does that mean he might fire people?" "It might," she admitted. "That's how men like him protect themselves. They push other people off the ship first." He was quiet for a long moment. The pencil rolled slowly under his fingers. "I saw him," he said softly, "when he opened the safe the first time." Rose's head snapped up. "What, in the hallway?" he said. "You were dusting. He was drunk. He was talking to it. He said the numbers out loud. I watched." Her throat went dry. She swallowed. "And you remember them?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. He nodded. "Left 3 to 47, right 2 to 23, left to 91, right to 15. The numbers came out of his mouth as calmly as if he were reciting the alphabet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. A car passed by outside its headlights, sweeping across the thin curtains. "Peter," she said slowly, "I told you not to stare when he was around. I know," he said, "but I saw. I couldn't stop seeing. It just stayed." She pushed her chair back and began to pace a little in the small space between the table and the counter. It took only a few steps to cross the kitchen, but she walked it like a path she might wear into the floor. "If he knew you were watching," she began, then stopped. "He already doesn't like me," Peter said quietly. She closed her eyes for a second, seeing Tom's face in the hallway, the way he had looked at her son, like a piece of furniture left in the wrong room. "He doesn't like people like us," she corrected gently. "That's different, and that's why we have to be careful." He watched her. His hands were folded now, his fingers worrying the edge of the notebook cover. What if, he started, then hesitated. What if what she asked, her voice softer? "What if I could help?" he said. "What if I told him he needs the code? I have it. Maybe he'd be grateful." He tried the word out like it was a new taste. Grateful. It felt strange in his mouth in connection with Mr. Johnson. Rose stopped pacing. She looked at him steadily. "Baby," she said, "a man like that does not see a child helping him. He sees a problem he has to manage. He might give us money, Peter said, a little breathless now that the thought had come out. A lot of money. Enough so you wouldn't have to work there. Enough so Grandma could have better medicine. Enough so we could move somewhere nicer. He has all that money in there, and he said he needs it. Maybe he'd share. The hope in his voice made her heart ache. She sat back down slowly and reached across the table to take his hands in hers. I want all those things too, she said, more than you know, but I also want you safe. More than anything. I'd be careful, he said. I'd just tell him, quietly. You think he'd take it as help, or you think he'd ask how you knew she asked? You think he'd thank you, or you think he'd accuse you? The picture of Tom's face when angry came into his mind without effort. He remembered the sharpness in his voice, the way he talked about people like you, as if they were a disease. I don't know, Peter whispered. I do, she said. She let go of his hands and rubbed her own palms together as if trying to warm them. I talked to a lawyer today, she added, surprising herself with the confession. His eyes widened. A lawyer? She nodded. At the community center, free clinic. I asked a hypothetical question. He waited. I asked what would happen if someone promised money to another person in exchange for doing something difficult. And if that promise was written down. And if that other person was like us. Not rich. Not powerful. What did she say he asked? She said a promise like that can matter. Especially if there are witnesses, Rose said. But she also said if the person making the promise is dangerous, the first thing is to stay safe. So, he said slowly, we wait. She looked at the bills again. At her son. At the future sitting between them like another envelope she had not opened. For now, she said, we wait. He nodded, but the thought did not leave him. The numbers did not leave him. They burned quietly in the back of his mind. Underscore, 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 underscore. On the sixth day, the air in the mansion felt heavier. By early afternoon, the clouds outside had thickened, dimming the light through the windows. The house lights came on their warm glow, not quite cutting the tension. In Tom's office, the safe waited in its corner door, still shut dial, still unmoved by any successful hand. The room was crowded now. Sasha and her team were there, along with a couple of other specialists who had been called back. A few senior staff members lined one wall, watching arms folded or hands clasped in front of them. Rose stood near the back, her cleaning cart parked discreetly by the door. Peter was with her holding a small dust cloth he was not actually using. Elijah had found a reason to be passing by with an empty mop bucket. He lingered just outside the door, pretending to fiddle with the handle. Tom paced like a man in a shrinking cage. His face was drawn, his eyes had a wild edge, his shirt sleeves were rolled up again, but his cufflinks were still on a tiny touch of stubborn vanity. I paid all of you, he was saying, voice sharp. I paid your companies, your teams, your hourly rates, and I still have a sealed box in my office. As we've explained, Sasha replied, standing with her hands clasped loosely in front of her, this is not a simple lock job. You wanted something that could not be bypassed. You have it. Her calm tone only made his anger burn hotter. He spun toward the safe and slammed his palm against the cold steel door. This is not security, he snapped. This is a hostage situation. No, sir, Sasha said. This is the reality of the system you chose. A murmur went through the room. One of the other technicians shifted their weight, uncomfortable. Rose could feel Peter's shoulder pressed against her hip. He was watching everything, taking in the angles of each person's face, the way fingers tightened on clipboards, the way a vein pulsed in Tom's neck. Her own heart thudded in her chest. She could almost feel his pulse through his shirt. It reminded her of when he was a baby, and she would hold him close, feeling that rapid, fragile beat, and knowing she would do anything to protect it. Tom stopped pacing suddenly and moved to his desk. He pulled open a drawer, rummaging around with jerky movements, then pulled out a pad of thick notepaper, his personal stationery, with his name embossed at the top. He slapped it down and grabbed a pen. All right, he said, his voice ringing in the room. Since none of you can do the job in a professional capacity, let's have a little incentive. The pen scratched hard against the paper as he wrote, pressing so hard the letters cut into the page. "I, Tom Johnson," he said, as he wrote, "hereby promise that any person who opens this safe and restores my access to its contents shall receive the full amount inside, $200 million. The room went very still. The soft sounds of someone shifting, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the distant whoosh of the air conditioning, everything else seemed to pull back. 200, one of the techs whispered. Tom finished writing, signed his name with his usual flourish, then held the paper up so everyone could see the bold lines. "There," he said. "You all see it. You're all witnesses." Sasha's eyes narrowed slightly. She pulled out her phone and, without making a show of it, snapped a quick photo of the paper. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "are you sure you want to put that in writing?" "I am," he said. $200 million to whoever opens it. I don't care if it's one of you or a janitor or a kid off the damn street. Open the safe, and it's yours." He tossed the pen down. It bounced once and rolled toward the edge of the desk. Rose felt Peter go very still beside her. The numbers in his mind flared bright again. 4723, 9115, 200 million. He looked up at his mother. Her face had drained of color. Her fingers gripped the handle of the cleaning cart so tightly her knuckles were white. His stomach fluttered. His chest felt tight. 200 million. That was more money than he could really picture, but he could picture what it could do. A better apartment, a safe neighborhood, his own room with a desk by the window. His grandmother in a better facility getting the care she needed, not just the care they could afford. His mother not dragging herself home late and waking up early to scrub someone else's floors. He swallowed. His mouth was suddenly dry. Elijah, standing just outside the door, heard those words too. He straightened his heart, giving a strange, heavy thump. He glanced toward the doorway and caught a glimpse of Peter's face. No, he thought. Not like this. In the room, people were exchanging looks. A couple of the techs were clearly thinking about the money. Others were thinking about the legal mess. "Is this binding?" One of the senior staff members murmured to another. "If it's written and witnessed," maybe the other whispered back. Sasha stepped closer to the desk. "We've recorded this," she said calmly, "just so there's no confusion about what you've promised." "Good," Tom snapped. "Now maybe somebody will stop wasting my time and actually solve my problem." He turned back to the safe, as if willing it to open through force of will. It did nothing. In the back of the room, Peter's heart pounded. His hand tightened on the cloth he held, crushing it into a small ball. Elijah's voice echoed in his memory. "That's a gift. Don't let anybody tell you different. To help people, to help yourself and the people you care about." He thought of his father, or rather of the few memories he had, soft ones, of a deeper voice telling him bedtime stories, of a warm hand ruffling his hair, of simple phrases that had stuck like pictures on his mental pages. "Use what you've got for something good, little man," that remembered voice said, "even when it scares you." His mother's hand moved slightly toward him like she could feel the shift in him. She did not quite touch him, but the message was clear. Stay. Still. He knew what she wanted. Stay invisible. Stay silent. Survive. He also knew what was happening around them. A man with too much power and too much anger was about to start looking for someone to push down. 200 million, he thought again, and in a quieter, more secret voice, "I can do it. I can open it. I know how." His chest felt tight. His breathing turned shallow. If I help him, he thought, maybe he stops. Maybe he doesn't lay this on the staff. Maybe Mama doesn't lose her job. But another thought followed sharp as a pin. Or he could turn on us. He could say we stole from him. He could make it worse. His stomach twisted. The room seemed to shrink around him, the air pressing in. The safe, the man, the paper with the promise, all of it pulled him forward like a magnet. His feet moved before he fully decided. He took one step out from behind the cleaning cart, then another. Peter Rose whispered, her voice harsh with fear. "No." He turned his head and looked up at her. Her eyes were wide, wet at the edges. She shook her head just once, barely. He held her gaze for a moment. He loved her more than anything. He also knew that every extra hour she worked was another hour her back hurt. Another hour her eyes burned. He thought, if I don't try and things get worse, will I always wonder what might have happened if I had been brave? He faced forward again and walked toward the safe. Every step felt like a drumbeat in his chest. The room noticed slowly then, all at once. One of the staff members nudged another. Heads turned. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Tom looked over, frown deepening. "What is this?" he demanded. Peter stopped a few feet from the safe. His hands were trembling. He tried to steady them by clasping them in front of him, but they still shook. He swallowed, then forced his voice to come out. "Excuse me, Mr. Johnson," he said. "Sir." The word sir felt strange and heavy, but he used it. There was a long pause. "You again, Tom," said, his tone sharp with irritation. "I thought I made myself clear about stray children." Peter's ears burned at the word. He kept his eyes on the safe, then on Tom's face. "I heard what you said," he managed. "About anyone who can open it." So Tom said, "You here to make a joke, boy? This isn't a game." His voice was not loud, but it was full of contempt. "No, sir," Peter said. His voice shook, but he did not let it break. "I'm not joking. I think I can open it." The room sucked in a collective breath. Behind him, Rose let out a small, broken sound. Her hand flew to her mouth. Elijah closed his eyes briefly, then stepped closer to the door, ready to move if things went bad. Sasha quietly unlocked her phone and tapped the record button for video this time. For one long, suspended moment, no one moved. The safe stood silent. The paper with the promise lay on the desk, the ink barely dry. $200 million sat behind a locked door, and a 10-year-old boy who had been told all his life to be invisible stood in front of the man who despised him and said in a trembling voice that he could help. Peter did not breathe for a moment after the words left his mouth. The room did not breathe either. It felt as if the whole world had paused to see what would happen next. Tom stared at him, blinking once slowly like his brain was struggling to accept what his eyes were seeing. Then his mouth twisted into a humorless, sharp-edged smile. "You," he said, pointing at the boy as if pointing at a misplaced tool. "You think you can open my safe?" Peter wet his lips. "Yes, sir." The sir came out soft, almost swallowed by the air around them. Tom let out a short laugh, not amusement, but disbelief mixed with contempt. It was the kind of laugh that said, "You are beneath my notice." "You must be out of your mind," Tom said. "You must think I'm desperate enough to let a child who shouldn't even be in this wing of the house, touch something worth more than your entire life." Nobody spoke. Even the air conditioning vent above seemed to quiet down. Rose took a step forward. Her face had gone pale, and her breath shook as she whispered, "Peter, please." But Peter didn't look back. His gaze stayed fixed on the safe. His heart hammered so loudly he could hear it in his ears, but it was not fear alone. Something else had taken root inside him. Something steady. Sasha watched him closely, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly in concentration. She had seen many things in her career, panicked clients, arrogant executives, brilliant technicians, but she had never seen a child step forward like this in front of so much anger. She said nothing, but her thumb pressed the record button on her phone. Tom paced one step toward Peter, and his shadow fell over the boy. "Tell me, kid," he said, voice quieter now. "Dangerously so. How would you know the code? Did you break into my office? Did you spy on me?" The accusation struck like a slap. "No," Peter said, shaking his head hard. I saw you open it. That night you came home. After the gala. I wasn't trying to watch. You were talking out loud. You said the numbers. You what?" Tom barked. "I just saw," Peter said, "and I remembered. You expect me to believe that?" Tom shot back. "You expect me to believe some child with nothing better to do than lurk in my hallways, some welfare case your mother drags around like baggage, has the mind to memorize a $70,000 combination lock." Behind him, Rose sucked in a breath. Elijah's hands curled into fists at his sides. Peter swallowed hard. His voice trembled. "I remember things. I just do." Ridiculous, Tom spat. He turned away as if to dismiss the boy, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the silence of the room. Perhaps the weight of the witnesses who had seen him put the promise in writing. Perhaps the fear of losing everything inside that safe. He spun back around, eyes narrowing. "Fine," Tom said. "Fine. You want to embarrass yourself? Go ahead. Try." Rose stepped forward again, voice breaking. "No," but Sasha gently caught her arm. Her eyes, calm and firm, said, "Let him choose." Elijah moved closer too, standing just behind Peter now, not crowding him, but anchoring him like a steadying hand, even though he didn't touch him. Tom gestured sharply toward the safe. "Well, go on," he said. "Open it. Let's see your little magic trick." Peter took a step forward. His sneakers made a faint squeak on the polished floor. He took another step, then another. When he reached the safe, the steel door loomed in front of him like the wall of a fortress. The dial sat in the middle, cool, heavy, waiting. He reached out his hand and paused. His fingers trembled in the air just inches above the metal. In that moment, a memory rose up without warning. A quiet kitchen warm light, the smell of oatmeal and cinnamon. His father, or maybe it was his grandfather. The memory was fuzzy, like an old photograph, leaning down with a smile. "You've got a mind like a lantern, son," the gentle voice said, "bright enough to light your way. Don't let the world tell you to dim it." The memory settled over him like a warm blanket. Peter exhaled, and then slowly he placed his fingers on the dial. The coldness of the metal jolted through his skin. He lifted his chin slightly. Everybody in the room leaned in. Left 3 times to 47. He turned it slowly. The dial clicked faintly under his fingertips. His thumb brushed across each number as it passed. His breathing leveled. 1 circle, 2, 3, click, 47. Right 2 times to 23. He reversed direction. The world around him faded. There was no Tom, no fear, no witnessing crowd, only numbers. Click, 23. Left to 91. He turned again. The dial glided under his small hands. 91. And finally, right to 15. His heart thudded once hard. 15. He stopped. He put his hand on the safe handle. Time seemed to stretch like a thin thread. Then he pulled. The door opened with a deep, heavy ka-thunk, a sound like the earth itself exhaling. People gasped. A few even stepped back in shock. Rose let out a soft, choked cry and covered her mouth with her hands. Elijah closed his eyes briefly, a quick, wordless prayer of thanks or awe or both. Sasha let out a quiet breath she didn't realize she'd been holding and kept the camera steady. Peter stared at the open safe frozen in place. He had done it. He had actually done it. And then the fear came. He turned his head just enough to see Tom. The man's face had gone blank. Not calm, not angry, just wiped clean of emotion like someone had erased him. But it didn't last. Slowly, like the heat rising from asphalt, fury crept up Tom's neck. His jaw clenched, his eyes hardened. Then it happened. He snapped. Tom lunged. His hand shot out, grabbing Peter by the front of his shirt and yanking him backward so violently the boy's feet slipped on the polished floor. "What did you do?" Tom roared, shaking him. "How did you cheat me? How did you break into my system, you little thief? You think you can trick me?" The room erupted. "Let him go," Rose screamed, trying to rush forward, but one of the stunned staff members blocked her path involuntarily. Elijah dropped the bucket he was holding, water splashed across the floor, and sprinted forward. Sasha stepped between Toman the boy, one hand raised like she could push back a tidal wave. "Mr. Johnson," she shouted. "Stop," but Tom didn't hear anything. He shoved Peter again, his face twisted with rage and panic, and something ugly that had lived in him for years. "You people are all the same," he shouted. "Liars, parasites. You think you can take from me. You think you deserve anything. Tom, stop." Sasha's voice cracked across the room as she reached for Peter's arm. The technician scrambled forward. Rose fought against the hands holding her back. Elijah grabbed Tom's wrist strong and sure. "Enough," Elijah bellowed. For a moment, everything froze again. Tom, Elijah, Sasha, the crowd, all locked in a perfect still moment of shock. Tom stared at Elijah, stunned that someone had dared to grab him. "You put your hands on me," Tom hissed. "You put your hands on a child," Elijah said, voice steady. "I'm stopping you." Sasha lifted her phone higher, capturing every second. Other phones appeared too, trembling hands holding cameras, recording, documenting, witnessing. Tom looked around and realized too late what he had done, that he was being filmed, that every racist word, every violent movement, every second of this was no longer secret. But instead of stepping back, instead of calming down, he pushed forward, shoving the boy and knocking Rose to the floor as she finally got close enough to reach for her son. Peter hit the ground hard. Rose hit harder. The sound of her body striking the floor echoed. Mama Peter cried as he crawled toward her, but Sasha and Elijah were already between them, now holding Tom back as he thrashed. "Get off me. You don't know who you're dealing with," Tom howled. Sasha's voice sliced through the chaos. "Everyone here is witnessing who you are, Mr. Johnson." It took 3 technicians to finally pull Tom toward the far wall. He fought them red-faced, panting, shaking with rage. Sasha knelt beside Rose, helping her sit up. Rose's hand shook as she held Peter against her chest. She ran her palm over his hair again and again, whispering, "You're okay. You're okay, baby. You're okay." Her voice cracked on the last word. Elijah stood nearby, chest-heaving fists still clenched tight. The safe door swung open behind them, its contents glinting in the overhead lights. Stacks of cash documents, bond certificates, account files, and a truth that could not be sealed again. underscore 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 underscore. For a moment, the room was completely still, except for the soft sound of Rose crying into her son's hair. Then Sasha straightened her eyes, moving toward the open safe. "What's in there?" she asked one of the technicians, her voice steady but cool. He reached in just enough to look. His face went pale. This is evidence," he breathed. "Offshore accounts, tax evasion, fraud, enough to bring down a dozen careers." Sasha's jaw tightened. She turned toward Rose and Peter, both shaken, both holding on to each other like they'd never let go again. Then she looked at Tom, furious, panting, defeated, trapped by his own violence. Then she looked back at the open safe. And she made a quiet, private decision. "It ends today," she whispered. No one but Elijah heard her, but he nodded once like he had been waiting for someone to say it. Underscore, 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 underscore. Outside the clouds that had gathered all afternoon finally broke. Rain began tapping against the tall windows, slow at first, then steadier. Like the sky itself had decided it could no longer hold back the weight of everything it had seen. Inside the office, Sasha helped Rose to her feet. Elijah steadied them both. Peter stood holding his mother's hand, small, shaken, but still upright. The boy, who had been raised to be invisible, had lit up the room more than any of them expected. And now that he was seen, truly seen, nothing in this house would ever be the same. This was the moment everything broke open. Not just the safe, the truth, the lies, the empire of one man's arrogance, and the quiet bravery of a child who remembered everything. The rain had softened by morning, leaving gentle streaks on the tall windows of the Johnson estate. The house felt strangely hollow now, as if the night's chaos had shaken something loose inside its walls. Most of the staff arrived quietly, speaking in murmurs. There had been messages sent out late the previous evening. An incident, temporary closures of certain rooms, heightened precautions. No one had mentioned names, but everyone already knew. Rose didn't go in that morning. She sat at the small kitchen table in their apartment, a hot cup of tea warming her hands while Peter's head rested lightly against her shoulder. He had barely slept. She hadn't slept at all. The bruises forming beneath her skin were small, but the bruises inside her heart felt deeper. She looked across the room at the old digital clock on the microwave. Its bright numbers glowed steady and patient. 7:42 a.m. Peter's soft breath rose and fell. She stroked his hair without thinking, over and over like she used to when he was a baby, and startled awake. A knock sounded at the door. Not sharp or urgent, gentle, polite. Rose's back straightened. Her breath caught. She stood slowly. "Stay here," she whispered to Peter, though he followed her to the very edge of the kitchen anyway. She opened the door. Sasha stood there, raincoat over her arm, her expression calm but concerned. Behind her stood Vivian Albright, the lawyer, in the red suit from the community center, holding a thin folder against her chest, her posture steady and reassuring. Elijah was there too, hands in the pockets of his janitor uniform, as if trying not to look too worried. Rose blinked. How did you?" Sasha gave her a small, tired smile. "We thought you might need someone on your side this morning." Vivian stepped forward with careful professional warmth. "Rose, I think it's time we talk. May we come in?" Rose hesitated only a second before nodding and stepping back to let them inside. The apartment seemed even smaller, with 3 extra adults inside, but none of them minded. Sasha set her coat carefully on a chair. Vivian placed her folder on the table. Elijah stood near the door, arms crossed loosely, taking in the details around him, the thin curtains, the cracked tile, the wall, where a small patch of paint had peeled. Peter sat beside his mother, eyes wide but steady. He recognized Vivian from the legal clinic, the same calm, kind woman who had explained things to his mother in simple words. Vivian pulled out a sheet of paper, a printed copy of Tom's promise from the day before. It looked even more important now that it was surrounded by careful hands and quiet focus. "I've reviewed everything," Vivian began. "The written promise, the threat, the assault, the videos." Rose swallowed hard. "What happens now?" "First," Vivian said, "you're both safe. Truly safe. You don't have to go back to that house. No one can force you. Not after what's on these recordings." She placed a hand gently on the table. It was a simple gesture, but steadying. "Second, you need to understand something very important. Your son helped expose major financial crimes yesterday." Sasha nodded. "And the authorities already have what they need." Rose's brows drew together. "Already?" "Yes," Sasha said quietly. "We sent the evidence last night. His behavior crossed lines we could not ignore morally or legally." Elijah gave a soft, grim hum. Man dug his own grave. Vivian opened the folder again and took out another page, a letter. "As of this morning," she said, "Tom Johnson has been placed on immediate leave by his board. Federal investigators have already begun the process of freezing accounts and reviewing the documents found in the safe." Rose stared at her, unable to quite process the flood of information, and Vivian added, tapping the original signed promise with her finger, "This is legally binding. The promise he made in writing with witnesses is enforceable." Peter's breath hitched. He looked from the paper to his mother, then back again. Rose shook her head slowly. "But he won't honor it. He'll fight it. He'll call us liars." "He can try," Vivian said gently, "but he will lose." Sasha leaned forward, her voice warm. "You were brave, Rose. And Peter, what you did was extraordinary." Peter's cheeks flushed slightly, but he didn't look away. Vivian's eyes softened. "This is going to change your lives. Not immediately, the legal process takes time. But the financial assurance, the protection, the settlement, it's all coming." Rose's eyes burned suddenly. She pressed a hand to her forehead, overwhelmed. Elijah stepped closer, speaking softly. "You ain't gotta work this in your head all at once. One breath at a time." Rose nodded, wiping a tear. She looked down at Peter, who was staring at the papers with a seriousness far beyond his years. "What about us?" she whispered. "Where do we go from here?" Vivian smiled, gentle and sure. "Wherever you want," she said. 2 weeks later, the Johnson estate looked nothing like it once had. The new owners had already moved in, contractors in overalls, movers shifting boxes, the old furniture hauled away. No more whispering house staff, no more clicking heels of executive guests, no more sharp orders or quick tempers echoing through marble halls. The office where the safe once stood had been emptied. The safe itself, removed by court order, sat strapped to a dolly in the hallway. Technicians were preparing it for transport, now evidence in an ongoing investigation. Peter stood near the wall with Elijah behind him, while Rose and Vivian spoke quietly with the man overseeing the removal. "You okay, kid?" Elijah asked softly. Peter took a moment before answering. "I think so." He stared at the safe, the steel door that had once looked like an unbreakable barrier. Now it looked smaller than he remembered. Just a metal box, not a monster. Sasha approached, clipboard in hand. She smiled at him. "You want to see it one last time?" Peter nodded. He stepped closer. The safe door was ajar, showing empty shelves inside. No money, no documents, only silence. He reached out and rested his hand gently on the cold metal, the way someone might touch the bark of a tree they'd known since childhood. It was colder than he remembered. A soft memory flickered his father's voice once more from a time his memory still held in fragments. "You're made of stronger things than any Locke son." Peter's fingers curled slightly against the steel. He whispered, barely audible, "You don't scare me anymore." Rose heard him, her breath caught not with sadness but with a warm, glowing pride. Vivian waited by the door, giving him time. Sasha nodded once in quiet respect. Elijah put a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Let's go, champ. Time to leave this place behind." Peter took one last look, then stepped away. 3 months later, the apartment building they once lived in had a new vacancy sign in the window. Rose and Peter didn't live there anymore. They lived in a modest but bright 2-bedroom apartment on a quiet street near a park. It wasn't fancy, no marble floors, no tall gates, just clean walls, big windows, and sunlight that warmed the living room each morning. A small desk sat in Peter's new bedroom now. He had placed a notebook on it, along with 2 pencils sharpened neatly. On the bulletin board above the desk hung a drawing. He'd made himself a simple picture of a door, opening light shining through. Rose was in the kitchen unpacking groceries when a knock at the door came. Elijah entered with an armful of canned chili and a loaf of bread, grinning like someone arriving for a holiday. Told you I'd bring something, he joked. You always do, Rose said, smiling warmly. Come on in. A moment later, Vivian arrived, still in her red suit, carrying a stack of documents neatly tied with a ribbon, the finalized settlement. Behind her came Sasha, dressed in casual clothes, for once, hair down, a small bag of cookies in hand. Peter lit up. You all came at the same time. Well, Vivian said with a shrug, we thought we'd check on you. Make sure you're settling in. Elijah placed the food on the counter, and to bring chili. That's important business. Sasha laughed softly, shaking her head. Rose looked around the room at the people who had stepped into their lives when everything fell apart. Her eyes grew warm. You're all family now, she said. The room went quiet, a warm, content quiet, the kind that fills a home, not just a house. Later that week, Peter stood in the neighborhood community center, surrounded by younger children. Their chairs were pulled up to folding tables, pencils rolled back and forth, homework sheets fanned out like little paper wings. He taught a girl how to do long division. He showed a boy how to remember a list using pictures in the mind. He laughed when someone asked if he was a math wizard. I just practice a lot, he said. Anyone can learn this stuff. Elijah was in the back, sweeping the floor, humming softly to himself. Vivian arrived with a box of after-school snacks. Rose came in with a warm smile, placing water cups on the table. Sasha stopped in, leaning in the doorway with her arms crossed, watching with quiet pride. And Peter, who once tiptoed through silent halls, told to make himself invisible, stood under the bright community center lights, tall for his age, confident in a gentle way, showing kindness as naturally as breathing. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't afraid to be seen. One evening, months after everything had changed, Peter sat on the small balcony outside their new apartment. The sky was painted with the soft colors of sunset, pale orange, gentle purple, fading blue. He had a blank sheet of paper and a pencil. Slowly, neatly, he wrote 47, 23, 91, 15. He looked at the numbers for a long time. They no longer sparked fear, no longer felt heavy. They were just numbers now. He folded the sheet, tore it once, then again, then let the small pieces fall into the trash bag beside him. Rose came to stand in the doorway, arms crossed gently over her chest. What were those numbers for again, she asked softly. Peter looked up at her and smiled, a quiet, mature smile that didn't belong to the scared boy who once whispered in the hallways of a mansion. Just an old lock, Mama, he said. I don't need it anymore. She walked over, rested her hand on his shoulder, and kissed the top of his head. The sun dipped lower. A breeze passed. The world settled in soft around them. And the boy who never asked to be seen, who had carried a mind too sharp for a world too harsh, finally felt something he hadn't felt before: peace.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.